So Grant, you lead KPMG's Global Tax Policy Group, and I wanted to catch up with you on Pillar 1. We recently had some news about a postponement. Can you talk about that and what it means from your perspective?
Yes, thanks, Rodney. So the Secretary General of the OECD, Matthias Cormann, at Davos announced that they will postpone the implementation of Pillar 1 from 2023 to 2024. He said that 2023 had been an ambitious time frame and that more work and more time was needed. So that's essentially the context for that postponement. In terms of the background to Pillar 1, I find that quite interesting. So you recall in Action Item 1 under BEPS 1.0, which was released in October 2015, there was no consensus to change anything in terms of the digital economy. So what was said in that report was that the other action items will solve the problems in relation to the digitalization of the economy, as they actually called it. India was very unhappy with that, and India requested and got certain passages included in that report that allowed it to deal with the problem using other measures. And in fact, in 2016, they introduced what was called a digital equalization levy, so named because it equalized the profit that should have been taken from the digital economy sector in their eyes. Now, France, Italy, Spain, and the UK, and a few others came around to that Indian position. And that led to two things. Firstly, the G20 asking the Secretariat, the OECD Secretariat, to reconsider their position in respect of Action Item 1. And secondly, other countries started to introduce their own DSTs, which led to the EU actually looking at that issue as well. In reconsidering the fundamental problems with BEPS 1.0, two flaws were identified. The first was the failure to recognise that the arm's length principle produced residual profit that was that could be located in low tax or no tax jurisdictions. It had been long thought that a multinational would produce residual profit arising from the synergies of it actually being a multinational and not dealing with entities at arm's length in the pure sense. But it was always thought that residual profit would lie at the top company. And that thinking had existed since the 1930s and the Carroll Commission. But many companies in the 70s, 80s and 90s, 2000s actually put in structures such that residual profit was located in lower tax jurisdictions. And the other flaw was that they failed to come up with a solution in relation to nexus, that treaties meant that certain companies had a presence in a jurisdiction in some sense, but that was not a taxable presence. So they were the two underlying concerns. And the OECD then sought consensus on how to change that. And what happened from that discussion is three views on where value was created were formed. There was sort of a UK-French view that value was created where work was done. So that if you had a social media website and someone typed away in relation to different issues, etc., and that typing away occurred in France or the UK, those jurisdictions thought that's where the value was created here. The second view was very much the US view on market intangibles. That's where the value is created. So that if you had a website, if you like, that brought short-term leases in place between the owner of property and those that wanted to rent it. In the US view, the value was in the algorithm. And then there was a third, which was very much an Indian view, that the value is where there was significant market presence. Now, consensus didn't arrive in respect of resolving those three views. And what the OECD Secretariat developed was a unified approach. And that led to Pillar 1 over the longer term. It was a bit of a hiccup history because the US administration thought that Pillar 1 should be optional, or it should be a safe harbour in shape. But with the change of administration, the new US administration saw it in a different light. Work had been developed in relation to digital economy and consumer-facing businesses to expand the notion of the companies that would be, I suppose, caught under this new sort of Pillar 1 reallocation of profit, which was the residual profit to market jurisdictions, which was the basis for that unified approach. Later, however, the US under a new administration said, no, let's not deal with it in that way. Let's just look at very large companies generally. And so that led to the current concept of very large companies with a turnover of greater than 20 billion euro being subject to Pillar 1, a reallocation of profits above 10% to market jurisdictions, with the exception of the extractive industries and regulated financial services, which, in the case of regulated financial services, countries like the UK, Germany, Switzerland wanted. In the case of the extractives, countries like Canada, Australia, and many of the developing countries wanted that exclusion. So that's where we've got on Pillar 1. The actual detail to calculate the profits, to work out who's the size of the market, who's the end user, etc., and various mechanisms for certainty have been quite complex. A lot of work has been done, but clearly putting in place such a sort of a complex set of rules within a limited time frame has been difficult, and the extra time is actually needed.
That's really interesting, Grant. Truly, it's a complex matter. What should we take from the 1 year deferral, if anything?
I think that we can say that it was anticipated. If you look at the agreement between the US and the EU in terms of not introducing a digital services tax or levy, that agreement was due to end on the 31st of December 2023. So I think it was anticipated a while ago that an extension might actually have been needed. And I think the OECD was pushing very hard for a 2023 year finalisation because they saw certain political windows, if you like, that might close in the future, particularly in relation to the US.
So that's really interesting. Well, December 23 is still not that far away in terms of trying to figure out how to accomplish this. And maybe the expiration of the DST truce, if you will, maybe that puts an additional pressure on actually getting this to the finish line on time.
And that's exactly right, Rodney. It's the Damocles sword here. So I think there's two worlds that we can see in the future: a world of Pillar 1, reallocation of residual profit to market jurisdictions, and a world of the proliferation of digital services taxes. I just think they're the two worlds and that we face in relation to this domain.
Well, just fascinating, Grant, and thank you very much for your time on this. I know that a lot of people have been parsing the wording of the deferral to figure out what it might mean, and I think what it means is we continue to plan for this as a potential eventuality, but there's a lot of political work to be done between here and there.
Absolutely. It would not be sensible to ignore this and not to plan for the future.
Well, wise words to end on. So, Grant, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Rodney.